Well, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to my very first episode. This is Crypt Rick, and this is I've Been Thinking. And what is this show exactly all about? Well, it's exactly about what I said it is. It's about what I've been thinking. And I wanted to make this show actually very epic and have my first guest. I wanted to be a special guest, and this is somebody I've been watching on YouTube for a few years now. And she is an amazing researcher. And how I found her was by a while back, actually, a few years back, I got involved in watching a very uh, amazing man who was creating uh, a movie that he was self financing and through crowdfunding and stuff, is what I should say. And it was called Gray State. And hopefully, some of you have heard of it. And his name was David Crowley. And I was definitely watching his YouTube channel as he was making videos, and he was giving us all updates on how the Gray State was coming along, kind of behind the scene footage. And then that abruptly ended one day, and didn't hear a little bit, and then found out very quickly that there was something very tragic that happened in that man's life, and that it was, for the sake of the police saying it was that it was a murder suicide. Police like to say that this man got to the end of his rope, decided to kill his wife, kill his young daughter, and then put a bullet in his head. And they wanted to basically say it was a murder suicide after only 2 hours of actually walking in the crime scene, as I like to call it, and looking around. And basically, I find that amazing that police can go into any scene, especially with this many people that are deceased in it, and determine within 2 hours that they are basically it's a murder suicide, and it's cut and dry case. And so this is where Catherine Jeans comes in, my great guest, and she has definitely been doing a lot of research on this. So I'm going to welcome her in. Hi, Catherine.
Well, hi, Crypt. How you doing?
I'm doing very good. I'm sorry if it was a long intro. Like as I
Oh,
said, it's my first one. I'm learning as I go.
no, you did great. Now, do you want me to call you Crypt or do you want me to call you Rick? What do you want me to call you?
You can call me Rick. How's that?
Okay,
Well,
perfect.
perfect. That way, yeah, it's just the name of my show. So
Okay.
someday I will tell you the story how I got that name, because it is actually a name that I've used in the past, and I will tell you one day. Great
Okay.
story. But anyways, so Catherine, what I am so excited to have you on on my first episode. I have been thinking about doing this podcast probably for 2 years now, and you're definitely, I'm not even exaggerating that I wanted you as my first guest, because I've been following, as I said in the intro, your channel for years now, and the amount of research that you've put into this David Crowley case is actually mind-boggling. It really is to me. I've seen you do your videos, and I can actually see that it does affect you. I've seen you upset. I've seen you mad. I've seen you more frustrated than more times than not by what's been going on. So what I wanted to ask you, just so people know, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and I know you have medical background, so just so people know that you do know what you're talking about, can you just let us know what medical background you have, and if you've ever worked on cases like this in the past, and that gives you some course on what you know, that you know what you're looking into.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. I mean, I'm honored. When you asked me to be your first guest, I was like, whoa. I mean, it humbled me. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Um, but yes, my background is I was an EMT for 10 plus years. Now my national registry was almost 10 years, not quite, but after that I was working under a license of a physician. So the opposition likes to try to think that they can dig things up, and they try to drag your name through the mud, and I don't want to give them any credit because there's so much to cover on David. However, my medical experience is varied. I worked at several military bases,
Mm-hmm.
which is most of my experience.
Okay.
Clinics, the emergency room, basically. Um, but I worked with doctors at Cape Fear Hospital
Mm-hmm.
in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I worked at the Darnell Army Community Hospital. I worked at Evans Army Community Hospital. Um, I just lots and lots of stuff.
Okay.
Not to mention coming across mass casualty crime scenes. Um, I've done several of those. Um, and then also, I have a friend of mine who was a deputy coroner for the Sacramento County Coroner's Office.
Okay.
And I won't say when they worked and what their name was due to lots of obvious reasons. But because of them, I was able to go and hang out with them and go on different cases that they were called on. And then one particular case that we got called out on, it was a murder, so I wasn't allowed to go on to that particular scene. Happened to be a shooting as well,
Okay.
but they knew who the person was. They had already arrested the person who was guilty, but still, while they were working that case, I got to actually stay in and watch an autopsy. I got to go look at the different bodies, different stages of
Wow.
decomp. I got to read all kinds of files, any file I wanted to. They're like, here you go. Here's our section of closed cases only, nothing active.
Okay.
They're like, here are closed cases. Go for it. So I'm like,
Wow.
sure. So yeah, I spent a lot of time reading up on a lot of different cases. So yeah, my background is extremely varied. And as I've also stated, my mother was married to a man who was in prison for murder. And again, this is a story that has been convoluted and twisted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how I came to, and then I was interviewing these gentlemen. They contacted me through my mother because both of, his name is Robert John Logan and then Mike Logan, who were both in prison in Arizona for committing murder. Two different women, two different situations, but brothers in the same prison
Right.
for the
I
same
remember you
crime.
talk. I remember you did a video about this.
Yeah.
I do remember.
Yeah. And the book that came out at the time was called Evil Intentions. And my mom had contacted me, and because I had just had a book published and it was for sale on Amazon, and it was a romance intrigue novel. And so my mom says, well, Bob and Mike want to know if you'll write their story. And I said, well, I've never done this kind of work before. I said, mine is, I didn't mean to write a romance novel. It was mainly supposed to be intrigue
Mm-hmm.
and act, not real action, but I'm not a romance person, but
Okay.
that was the niche that the publisher had, so that's where they stuck it in. So anyway, I'm like, well, you know, um, I said, I don't like what you're telling me, but okay, I'll talk to him. So after a lot of research and years, I mean, I'm talking years, 4 or 5 years, going down between Colorado and Florence, and you have to get special permission. It's not, you can't just be on somebody's list and show up one day. You have to go through an entire process. And I always told those guys, I said, if it ever comes a time where I feel you've lied to me or I feel you're stonewalling me, I will walk away. I don't care how much work I've put into it.
Okay.
And one of the brothers, Mike, Bob was who the man my mother had married, Bob Logan, Robert John Logan. He was always very honest. I mean, for a criminal and someone who's in prison for murder, I swear, you get more honesty out of that guy than probably somebody walking down the street. His brother, however, was a whole different ballgame. And his brother told me, he says, well, I won't tell you my whole side of the story until Jesse, who is Mike and Jesse did their crime together, and it
Okay.
was horrible. And I won't say, I mean, it was just horrible what they did to this woman.
Okay.
But he always stated that he would never tell me the whole story until Jesse was executed because he was on death row.
Okay.
And so during this time, because of my research, the federal prosecuting office, they're trying to see if they could get a stay of execution. They're getting my files, blah blah blah, and I'm like, you don't want my files. What I have on
So,
your clients.
right. So what they were trying to, what I'm gathering is what they were trying to do is try to find hope through you, that you would find something that would give them a stay of execution.
Yes,
And
yeah,
and this.
they were hoping that something I had found
Yep.
would help them keep
Okay. Okay.
at least, the the prosecution and the defending office, both of them, and I'm just like, going, you guys, you know, leave me out of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't. When you have the federal government knocking at your door saying we want your files, you hand them
You
over.
hand them over.
So I'm like, okay. But anyway, I mean, and it's horrible that he was executed, and it's horrible. His last words were, all this for killing that bitch. And I'm sorry about the language, but
That's
that's what he
okay.
said.
Nope. That's okay. Fine.
And I mean, this is the kind of person he was. So anyway, after that was done, I had to go through the whole process, drove back down and said, okay, Mike, he's been executed now. Let's get down to the real story. And then all of a sudden he conveniently forgot everything.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, well, I'm not, I said, I told you what I would do. And I said, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm done. And I walked. I never looked back from anything. But I was researching my own book to cover their side of the story.
I see.
And I had nothing to do with evil intentions except for the fact that I read the book. And then when I was reading the court documents, it was so far off base. There really was no truth to anything other than maybe what he said about the women's families, because I don't know, because I didn't want to contact them because I was researching the people who hurt their daughters, you know, and I felt that was just not okay. So he may have been telling the truth about that, I don't know, but as far as the court documents go, it was wrong, just wrong everywhere. And that's kind of what started me down this path. And then I joined from there. I joined back in the day. I joined an FBI group, FBI investigators and stuff. But because I had a background, they let me join their group.
Okay.
Well, then it got cliquish, and I got booted out because I didn't have a degree. You know how that goes. So
Oh, for sure, I can imagine.
yeah. So then I'm like, whatever. And then I actually went and got a job. But anyway, then there was a time period. And then when I was out of work, and my longtime, I mean, at our age, do you call them boyfriends? I don't know. The person we had been committed to each other.
Right.
He had passed away. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. So I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do? And then I happened upon Richie from Boston on YouTube.
I know him. I don't know him. I know his channel. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll admit, a lot of times I thought the guy was loonier than snot at first until I started to dig a little bit deeper, and I'm like, wait, he's not so crazy after all. Well, then he just happened to mention the David Crowley case. And I was like thinking, going, so many times, especially when you have groups of people, they'll read something and not understand it, and then they kind of form an opinion based on the fact that they didn't understand what they were reading. Okay. So me and my arrogance, I was like, okay, I'll read this and I'll let these guys know why he actually was guilty. They just don't understand the autopsy, right?
Right.
Thought process.
I remember you saying that. That's what you were trying to do was basically prove that it was a murder-suicide.
Yeah, explain to them why they didn't get it, right?
Right.
So and then I had watched the documentary on Netflix.
That was awful.
And right away.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I watched that, I mean, like the hair on the back of your neck stood up, and I'm like, something's not right.
Well, they lead you down they're leading you down a path where they want to lead you. They're not giving you both sides, and they're not giving you different sides. They're trying to lead you down a very firm decision that he did it, and there was no way around it, and the evidence isn't there. I know. I've seen your evidence.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right, and that's exactly what this so-called documentary did. And because of my work experience and then people I've been able to work with in my working career, I've learned a lot about body language and things that you pick up on that most people would never notice. So I'm noticing things like this. I'm noticing that they're leading questions, that they're pushing a narrative, that even David's own father didn't seem to believe what he was saying.
Exactly.
And so I'm like, okay, then I'm like, maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. So as soon as the autopsy reports became available, and I got them and I started reading them, and right away I'm like, this isn't right. When there's no lividity, which is when a person dies and there's blood in your body, it settles at the lowest point. So if you're sitting, it'll settle on your butt. Laying down, it settles on your back. Anyway, when the medical examiner is saying that there is no lividity, and I'm like, and then I'm looking at the crime scene, and there's no blood, really. I mean, there's a little bit of blood, but there's no blood.
No, not for 3 people. When I look at the crime scene, I'm like, that's the first thing I said. There's blood, but there's not a lot of blood. I expect way more. I don't know. I've never seen a body bleed out, but I assume that there's more than what I saw, for the amount of damage that was going on.
Well, and here's the thing. A lot of people think that gunshot wounds are like you see on TV or in the movies. You see everything gets flying everywhere. That's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
However, if you have a total of 4 gunshot wounds to 3 separate heads,
Hmm.
there's going to be stuff everywhere. There
Exactly.
should be blood matter. I mean, brain matter everywhere. Blood and then brain matter, and you should be seeing high velocity blood spatter, which is virtually absent.
That's what you said.
There
Yes.
might be a little bit here or there, but not what you would expect to see with 4 gunshot wounds to heads. And yeah, and so from there it just spiraled, and I just realized, wait a second, I need to change my attitude and put myself in check, and that these people are actually onto something. And then from there it was getting documents and then just researching.
Right.
Um, it,
Now
it
you
was
said,
just
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but now
no,
you
go ahead.
said in one of your videos that basically, and I've seen this in other videos where the police went in, they got a phone call from a neighbor, and which I find suspicious to begin with because they look through the window and she determines by looking through the window that it's a murder suicide. He killed them all. I don't know how you know that by looking through a window without getting in the room, but she says this. The police come. If and stop me if I get this wrong. I kind of got a lot of things on my head. I've been studying your videos now for 2 weeks, so I got a lot of going on. Um, they basically the police go in, all the medical people, and they determine that it's a murder suicide within 2 hours. Is that correct? Hi, I don't need your
Yes,
help.
and according to a new, and this is why I keep quoting it, because it was one major newspaper, and I do have the article saved somewhere on my laptop, but it does state in there where they're interviewing the police chief, and
Hmm.
they quote him as saying, "Within 2 hours, we knew it was a murder suicide."
And that's very unlikely, right? That's a
Very unlikely.
okay. That's
I
what I
mean,
figured.
they left the crime scene with 3 bodies and only 3 bullet
Hmm.
fragments. But what they didn't know, and so, already they put together the narrative, and you know that right away by saying it's murder suicide. But the 3 fragments they left with that day
Hmm.
all belonged to Kamel.
Kamal, his wife, yes.
Yeah, and they were missing Ranya's, and they were missing David.
Hmm.
So how could it be a murder suicide when and right there you start to see the pattern of assumptions, and then where pieces then start to be brought in to fit what it is that they're trying to say happened.
Right. So they're not
But
trying. They're not trying to. Basically, they're trying to look at the crime scene and fit the pieces that are there into what they want to believe. Not
that's
following. Not
that's how it
following the evidence.
yes, that's how it appears to me.
To
That's
me
exactly
too.
how it
To me
appears.
too. I totally agree with you, and I find that very. Now, what I know you have a lot. You have many different points where a lot of things that do concern you. Now, I know that what they were saying. I checked out a lot of the photos that you have and the way they lay it on the body and stuff. And you're very great at explaining that. There's no way. Do you think they were either dragged into position, from what I remember, or placed there somehow? Like they did not die the way they did not die and land the way they say they did. Am I
Correct.
correct
They
on
did
that?
not, their bodies are not what is called in situ. In
Okay.
situ is how something lies after the crime or event happens.
Okay.
And their bodies are clearly not in situ.
And what makes you
They
believe
were,
that? What makes you believe that? What's your greatest evidence that there's no way that they fell this way?
well, because for Kamel, for me, the main thing is her left hand is missing, but
Hmm.
it is underneath her body.
Okay.
So it's like it's up underneath here, but her hand is missing. And now that we've seen the sweater around the wrist area is not frayed, unlike with her right arm. You see some fraying.
A little bit.
So
Yep.
yeah, and but at the angle of where her head was, which was pretty close to the couch itself,
Hmm.
and then she had there was a blanket or a sweater. There was, I think, a blanket actually
Yeah.
over her head area.
Okay.
So the dog couldn't even see it, but so yet it's frayed.
Hmm.
And then her arms up underneath her. And then for little Rania, we see that in the police drawings that she was found lying on her left side between her mom's legs with her head pretty much really close to Kamel's backside.
Right. Right.
But in the photo that they released by accident, that was included in their report to show that he was guilty.
Mm-hmm.
She is actually lying on top of her mom's left leg
Which makes no
and
sense.
laying right next to her dad. Yeah, so it's obvious the body's been moved because in the sketch they have her one way, and in the photo she's lying completely different.
Exactly.
And with David, when you look at the decomp marking on the rug underneath the body you see, whether it's him or Kamel, we don't know. We just know a body was positioned, say, this way,
Mm-hmm.
but when he was found, it's this way.
Exactly.
So, and then he's like this with his shirt pulled up underneath him,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're dragging and the shirt gets rolled up
That's
you're
yes.
dragging across the floor. So, I mean, there are lots of clues that these bodies were not lying in the position that they were in. And the police want us to believe and have stated that they think maybe paleo drugged them. I don't think so.
He's not a big enough dog. I've seen
No.
the dog in that Gray State on Netflix, and he's not that big of a dog.
Yeah,
And they blame the dog for a lot. I mean, this dog apparently ate bodies and ate parts of the body, ate the face off of them, dragged the bodies, and as you've pointed out, there's not enough dog feces around the whole house for him to have done this. And I think that there's also a point where you said there was actually dog food and water present.
Yes.
So none of this makes sense.
There were 2 bags of dog food, one which had been opened, but they were right next to each other on the floor.
On the
Between
floor.
the kitchen and the back door. So the dog had easy access to it.
Exactly.
Could have easily ripped it open. And then someone had left one toilet lid open. So there was only water from one toilet, which tells me, because dogs drink a lot, and if they're going to be eating human flesh, they're going to get thirstier. So the dog would be consuming a lot of fluid, but where's that water coming from?
Exactly.
So,
Now
and
what do you think? Do you think the dog was there the whole time, locked in the basement? What do you think? Just a guess.
My best guess is that paleo was probably kept in another room or kept somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
There is a little bit of feces downstairs and a little bit upstairs. I think at one point I counted them. I think I counted 29 separate little,
No,
there
yeah.
was 3. I counted them, and there was
Okay.
like 29 within the photos that they gave us. And I'm like, that just isn't enough for 3 weeks.
3 weeks is it's a long time. And
Yeah.
did they ever test the feces if there was bone fragments in it?
They never did. They dropped the dog off, and they gave, in the police reports, they state that they told the shelter to only feed and water the dog and don't do anything else because it was part of a potential crime scene.
Okay.
Not to collect feces, not to collect urine, not to do a stomach contents, nothing. They did nothing with this dog, nor did they collect anything at the scene.
That's amazing, because you think if they blame so much on this dog for the conditions of the body that you would think they would test it. I would. I'm just thinking about what I would do when I go into this case. I'm not an investigator, I'm not a detective, but I got common sense. And I'm just thinking, like, I see the size of the dog, and it's just, he's not big enough to do what they're claiming. I don't think. I mean, I'm sure that there is cases where the dogs have I know you stated actually in one of your videos that there is cases where you've seen photos of where a dog consumed their owner over time. But what I don't understand is how a dog his size can eat a skull, eat hands, and I actually thought of this actually yesterday when I was at my friend's house. Catherine, you'll probably find this funny, but my friend gave his dog a bone, and I was watching him chew and work this bone over, and they really gnaw on that. Like, there's a lot. When he was done gnawing on it, I looked at it because I was like, okay, if the dog did all this on the hands and on the face and that, I want to see what the edge of the bone that he was gnawing looked like yesterday. And it was so ragged. And you're saying that there's none of that on these autopsy photos. It's clean. It's clean.
Yeah, from what they've showed us, and before I move on to that, I would, I kind of want to make this one point about
Sure,
paleo.
anything you like.
They blame this poor dog, like you said, they blame this poor dog for everything. But this dog is like the miracle dog, right? Miracle dog of all dogs. So not only was he able to consume both of Camel's hands and most of her face, but he did it while her arm is under her body.
Yes,
And while
exactly.
and then covers her head with a blanket.
Well, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
exactly.
And she's and she's laying like this with her arm like this, but yet somehow the dog could get in there and eat all this part of her face. I'm not buying that. I
I'm
just
not
don't buy
either.
it. And so yeah, and that was the thing when I talked to the medical examiner, Dr. Kelly, and because he's the one who showed me a photo of a woman. Okay, I shouldn't say it's a woman. Let's just say it was a person. It was a photo, and you couldn't tell. I couldn't tell.
Okay.
It was just a body from the waist up, and the only thing there was the spine and then the head. But I knew it was an older person, but that was my comment to him, because he's like, well, this is what can happen, but with a dog. And I said, okay, we have a couple of differences here. And I wasn't trying to be a smart ass, but it's the truth.
It's the
Where
truth.
you have an older person who has softer bones. But I said, but the head is still there. And that's really, I'm like going, okay, the head is still intact. And I have 2 adult heads that are virtually missing over half, and a little child who wasn't touched by the dog they're saying did this. I go, it's not adding up. It just doesn't add up.
No, and you would think that the dog, I would think, would go after the child because they're softer, more tender, and
Easier.
easier, and they wouldn't. I don't think the dog would automatically go to the skull, where it's tougher. They would work on all the other areas, and you would see from when I saw the dog bone, they really work on the bone, and you could see all the jagged edges and splinters of bone everywhere just from me watching this dog for an hour yesterday. And I don't understand how the police can blame all of this on the dog. I find it. I don't know if this is shoddy police work or if it's a cover up, like people say. I don't. I have my theories. I don't like this. I wouldn't want to say what they were, but I just.
Well, and I think a lot of us are coming to theories that, let's admit, probably for the most part, could be far-fetched.
Yep.
But are they really? Maybe they're not. And like the part about where the piece of David's skull, and this is what I focus on a lot.
This was amazing when you found this. You
Um,
gotta tell the audience about this.
Yeah, because here they have this skull cap on the floor. And on this skull cap, I remember my corner friend had come over to visit me one day at my house. And they're like, oh my God, would you just get away from that case? And come talk to me, right? And I said, I can't. I said, I'm staring at this photo and it's bugging me. I said, there's something here and I'm missing it. It's right in front of my face, but something's not right. I said, okay, this is your job. Get over here and tell me what it is that I'm seeing, but my brain is refusing to accept.
Right.
And they walked up and they're like going, well, that person was murdered. And they didn't know, right? I had not,
Right.
they just knew I was looking at a case. And I said, okay, tell me why. And they're like, well, that's blunt force trauma. And they started pointing out all the places I was looking, but I didn't understand at the time what I was seeing.
Right.
And they're like, okay, move. You got to move now. So they kick me out of my chair, and then they sit down. They start looking, and they start counting. They stopped at 10. No, they stopped at 10. And they said, there are over 10 individual blows to this piece of skull. They're
Wow.
like, this person was murdered. And they said some of these impacts were so hard that it could have actually killed the person before they were shot in the head.
Wow.
And
This is huge. This is huge.
It really, and it's right there. I mean, everybody can see it. And
Yeah.
when Tony dropped the other photos onto the group page not too long ago, and then I saw that skull cap piece under the lights in the medical examiner's office, which really gave good lighting. I'm like, it is so evident in how that ME, all 3 of them that signed off on these documents, how all 3 of them allowed that to go through as a suicide is reprehensible.
It is, and especially when the videos I've seen on your channel, which I really strongly suggest my followers actually go and look at. When you show the skull bit, you can see it, and I'm not even trained. But when somebody points it out to you, you can see the pattern,
Yep.
and it looks like, to me, it looks like, as you said, a ratchet. It
Yeah.
looks like something like a ratchet or something.
There,
And
there. I found three different tool marks, and the clearest one I could find was the six-sided ratchet.
yes,
And I'm just like, and it would be similar to say like, because I have the long handles with the ratchet end, like
yep,
for a truck or something. You would
yep,
take that. Those suckers are heavy
they
too.
are.
And so that is as clear as day, that indentation. But then when I started looking at that, and you see the skin around this skull piece,
Hmm.
and it's straight lines.
Like it's cut.
And yeah, and they're saying the dog ripped that off.
So
I
there's
don't
no
know.
way that Paleo could, this miracle dog, as we've called him, there's no way that he could have peeled that away from the skull and make it straight like that. There would
No,
have been
because
some.
it's like skin, from whatever part, wherever that was.
Hmm.
Just for example, say it was like here, and it was straight,
Okay.
straight, straight. And dogs can't do that.
No, they can't.
Yeah, so, and then the one weapon that had all three blood and or DNA on it, which was the knife,
The
which was
knife.
found open, they totally just ignored that. They marked
Yeah.
it, logged it, and then
I,
whatever.
I don't. They didn't. That's another thing, is that even the way, like you described, that the way that the knife was, they found the knife. It wouldn't make practical sense on how he was holding it. Correct? He would have. He wouldn't. They want to believe that he was holding it towards him, which, like, holding the blade basically. Is
Hmm.
that what you're trying to? Is that what you're
It
explaining?
was, it was blade, he's out like this, right? And
Yep.
it was next to his leg, blade up, like facing toward his head.
Okay.
I mean, who goes around holding a knife like this with the blade up, right?
Right. You hold it.
Come on.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
it's
and
all
they,
scream staging.
it does, and that's another thing, is that they found the blood on it, and I don't understand why they wouldn't have tested more. They seem to be leaving a. They seem to really be cutting corners on this, to me, and I'm sure, and which you have found out. All I mean, you've proven, and um, another thing I've really found interesting. What you were, I watched another one of your. As I said, I watched all of them. I found it fascinating. Um, where they have the bloody footprint. You really got upset about this, saying that
I
it's a blood.
fight with everybody to this day over that.
And I had to really look at the video last night, because I was like, I actually tried what you said to do, to put the paint on the side, and it looks just like that image, like the toe part with the little part of your finger.
Hmm.
It does look like a little kid's project. I really does, and
Yeah.
you noticed that right away. I noticed
Yeah,
that.
there were several of us who actually, it was like about the same time where we noticed the same thing. And it's like, wait a second, this is an art project. And in fact, it was Dan Hennon,
Hmm.
who called it the kindergarten art project. And I go, that's the perfect word. So I kind of ran with it after that. But for me, what solidifies, and it is not a freaking bloody footprint. And because I'm like, look at the photos, and where they sprayed what is called amino black, which
Right.
is the areas where it turns blue,
Yeah,
where
like
it comes in
luminol, kind of,
contact.
like a
Yeah, it
luminol.
comes in contact with the hemoglobin, right?
Okay.
And when they take the photo head on and it resembles bloody footprints, and then they spray it with amino black, and you clearly see the individual sections. Now, nobody's foot that I know of has individual sections.
Exactly.
And the big toe, you see a swipe mark that is not visible before they spray it with amino black. And again, the amino black only reacts with the hemoglobin in the blood. So that tells you that there was something there, and somebody cleaned it up, thought they cleaned it up good enough, and then put another pattern on top of that.
Okay.
And it is as plain as day that it doesn't even match up with the ball of the foot. And that's just, again, one of the many things. And then I don't know of anybody's toe who makes a circle with one straight line down.
Yeah, exactly. It
And
doesn't look like a footprint at all to me, like when I looked at it. And then now, what I wanted to ask is, there. I know that there was lots of blood in the living room area, from what I could see in the video, your videos and the photos I've been looking at. Was there any blood anywhere else in the house? Like, was it just in the living room area where they say this supposed murder suicide took place? Is
there
it?
was a little bit of blood spatter at the very beginning of the hallway on the floor, because you see some on the wall, and
Mm-hmm.
then a little bit on the floor there. But then there's a transfer stain, a smudge, right by Ranya's door on the wall. And then, other than the living room area, there was only blood found in the kitchen. where it was passive drops.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which
that right there should have told them that that probably came from a perpetrator,
right,
whoever that perpetrator could have been.
right,
That did not come from the victims in the living room,
exactly. Yeah, it's
but
very.
they never tested it.
They I don't and is that very is that it's is that let me try to figure this how I want to. Is it uncommon for police to not test all the blood in a crime scene, or do they normally test all of it that they find?
Not all of it is tested, no.
Okay.
Because if they take a bunch like they did from the floor, they took some from the wall on the
Mm-hmm.
island. They took swabs from the floor and then took a swab from the, and you don't want to, you're not going to test all of it because that's just, it's crazy. Because if you look a lot, you're like, chances are, although it may not be, chances are most of that is going to come from the same person.
Okay.
However, if the situations like on the recliner, that should have been tested.
Mm-hmm.
It never was. In the kitchen, especially the passive blood in the kitchen, should have been tested.
Exactly.
And it wasn't. And what else?
Even in the by Ranya's room, it should have been tested. Anything that wasn't in that immediate area should have
Yeah.
been tested.
Yeah, because there was drag marks that looked to be drag marks of blood behind the recliner.
I saw
the
that.
floor,
Yes.
and that was not tested. Just so much. And you would think, again, logic would tell them that, okay, we have 3 victims, and the only blood we have found in this house belongs to one.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And but I kind of what I forgot to ask you at the beginning with the gun with regards to the gunshots. Now is it if I'm remembering correctly, it was the neighbor said they heard only 3 shots. Is that correct?
Yes, but that was at the beginning of the month.
Okay.
Somewhere between what did they say, the 1st and the 10th, or the 9th and the 10th. It was at the beginning of December that they supposedly heard gunshots, but it was only 3. And yet we have, 6 or 7 rounds
6.
fired in that house?
And you think that in a neighborhood like that, you would hear that. And then another thing I wanted you to bring up, which I find fascinating too, is that tell us about the patio door. That this was not a door that was tightly shut. And I know that they're saying that there was no break and enter, but how do you break and enter when a door is open? I mean, there's no break.
Exactly. I mean, and they go to great lengths to take photographs of every door handle to prove there was no forced entry.
Right?
But they have a back door that is ajar 1/4 of an inch
Right?
and a kitchen window that is not locked.
It
So
doesn't-
why would, it's like, hello, you're not going to have forced entry.
Right, and why would the dog open the door with his nose and go out? Like
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
close it again.
and close it again. Yeah, I know dogs that with a little crack in the patio door, they open it and they go
Uh-huh.
outside. And this he would have done that within 3 weeks. I'm sorry, I just know he would have. Any dog would have. And I mean, like I like the way you call him the miracle dog because it's true. He basically. I'm surprised they're not saying he shot them because he's done everything else. He's done everything else. Now, what I find interesting too is that what about they have the gun that supposedly did this. Is there any prints on this gun that are David's that they can say yes, this is his. He held this gun, and he was the last one holding it. He did the shooting, or is there not? Isn't there a residue from a gunshot if it's close to the head and stuff? There's like gunpowder burns, stuff like. If you,
Okay,
I'm
no.
kind of jumping all over, but do you
No,
know what
no.
I mean?
I gotcha. I mean, if it's a close contact wound,
Mhm.
you would expect to see the stippling
Right.
and gunshot
Stippling,
powder.
that's it. Right.
But they didn't test for any of that.
Okay.
They couldn't see stippling. They did see a round impression on poor little Ron. I believe it was little Ranya's head. They could see a
correct.
circular impression.
Right.
But as far as the entrance and our exit wounds for David and Kamel, there was nothing there.
And what about the gun? Is his prints on there?
As far as the gun goes, they found a partial palm print, but they had nothing to compare that to David with. They had a partial print on the magazine itself because there's a bloody fingerprint on the magazine. But they determined that there were multiple stacks, so it looked like there were a couple of touches, and they couldn't determine which thumbprint or which fingerprint was on there, and if it was David's, and when it was done, because there was stacked prints.
Okay, I see. And then,
So
and also no prints of David's on the gun safe where he kept it.
no, that was actually Kamel's. They found Kamel's DNA on the gun safe, not David's.
That doesn't. Okay, so apparently
Yeah,
he had a breakdown. She went and got him the gun, so he could do this. Is what they want us to believe, kind of. Like this,
I
just.
have no idea.
I mean,
And yeah,
okay. So and now what I've also was this has kind of always made me wonder too is in your investigation. Now you don't have to say you don't have to actually say definitively, but I think you're leaning on the side that it wasn't a murder suicide. From what I've done in my research, I can't see anything um, in any of his diaries that I've seen people post that he was anywhere close to doing something like this. There's not, and I from what I can remember, the police said they went through all. He had terabytes of information on multiple hard drives. From what I can tell of David just by watching the videos and that, this man kept track of stuff in great detail. And he kept his thoughts on journals and stuff like that. There was nothing they found, right, that even hinted towards him doing this.
yeah, and that was done by Detective Clocanos. I think I'm saying his name
Mm-hmm.
correctly.
Yep.
And that's his job. He works actually for the Dakota County Sheriff's Department, but he did his research for the Apple Valley Police Department, and he went through all of it. And his report is that we could find nothing that justifies motive. We can't give you a motive. And as you know, when you read through all of it, there is no motive.
There's none.
There's
No.
just nothing.
He was actually seemed to me that he was on a high note and trying to move on with his life. And now that with that said, I can always play devil's advocate. I mean, he very well could have snapped, and this could happen the way they say it did. I don't personally believe that. That's my opinion. Just because there's so much pointing in a different direction. Now, who do you? What is your? I'm trying to word this the right way. Um, who do you are your biggest suspects? Who had to gain from David Crowley getting murdered
Um,
or doing this?
everyone that was close to him had something to gain.
Okay.
And again, this is not me saying you did it, you did it, you
Exactly.
did it, but I'm saying, and this is not easy to say,
Okay.
but his brother,
Hmm.
Kamel's sister. We have Danny August Mason. So we have Dan Jr., we have Sidra, we have Danny August Mason, we have Sean Wright, we have Mason Hendricks, we have Joseph Seaton, we have the Apple Valley Police Department. Now I'm saying they weren't. I'm not saying they're in on it, but I'm saying they have motive to cover things.
Exactly.
But I mean, everywhere, motive points in every direction
Right.
except for toward David. And for me, I will say, um, unless, and I don't even see how they could do that because his skull piece alone tells me he was murdered.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to bring up.
Yeah.
I was going to
So
say.
if he was murdered, how could he have done this? It just makes no sense to me.
Right, and I find it very strange that in this police investigation that they wouldn't have even did they even question all these people? Like, did they ever go to all of these people that we suspect had something to do with it, and just to even rule them out? Like, just to say,
Yeah, they talked to them, but never to rule them out or never even as a person of interest, which they should have been. Any good investigation, everybody who's close to victims is considered a person of interest until they're ruled out.
till they're not.
And that's everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere across the world. And so the fact that they didn't do that, and then they're talking to these people who then say, come across as they were just David's best buds, right? Danny, we have Sean, and we have Mason.
Oh, they all
Those three
yeah
especially.
they all say they were best friends and they were all
Yeah.
getting along, and then you listen to David's notes and it's not they're lying.
And they read it. And
Yes.
this is the point. They're reading his journal where David is like, I want these people out of my life. They're soul sucking pariah.
Yep, that
And
was his
so-
exact words.
Yeah, and so the fact that he's saying this and they're like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to consider them suspect when Danny was in his mind. Now, I will argue back and forth with everybody. He has no claim to any of that.
Mhm.
Because David rewrote that script. Everything that he presented to the Hollywood producers was his work.
Yes.
And Danny was trying to hold on to something that was a concept that they had at the very beginning. David had long past gone way over that.
Yes, he wrote
And
the
so,
script. He wrote the script a couple different times, correct? And
mhm,
he was also working on other projects. He had a lot of
yes.
projects. That's why I try to tell people is that he was on Gray State and he was focused on that, but he also had a lot of other side projects that he was looking into. And I think what his goal was to get away from where he was living, get to Hollywood, and meet up with the right people so he could become a movie
A
creator,
playwright.
a
Yeah.
playwright. And I think that a lot of the people that were close to him at the beginning of Gray State that had a stake in it, you could obviously see that they were trying to pull. He was trying to pull away from them,
Yep.
and there was people that weren't giving in. They weren't they weren't signing over waivers, releasing themselves from the project. So I see where they could be suspects. Um,
Yeah,
be,
and and I think about, the one person who did, and that was Mitch Heil, who was David's friend from high school.
yep.
And they went to the military together. And yeah, did it kind of hurt Mitch? From what I'm gathering, my interpretation of what I've read from Mitch is that, yeah, he wasn't too happy with the fact that they dissolved bullet exchange, but he understood. So he's like, sure, let's do it if it will help you go and fulfill your goal.
Hmm.
That's a friend.
That's
Now
a
that's
friend,
somebody who has your best interest at heart,
right?
not those who are trying to go, oh yeah, this is mine and I'm going to claim it and you're not going to do this, and oh David, don't you put that in there in the rise because you're going to send me to prison for 76 years. You better calm. And this is, if they're putting this on social media
Hmm.
and the police see this, they have it as part of their records and yet don't consider it motive.
And what I find very disturbing is that you sent these autopsy photos with the skull bit that shows the ratchet marks. I listened to the interview last night, actually, where you spoke with the detective, and I have never seen more deflecting. He didn't answer one of your questions. He didn't answer it yes or no. It was always, we believe that we did a great job. I know you believe you did a great job, but that doesn't mean that's what happened. And I
Yep.
find that, so I mean, I don't understand how the police can look at that photo, and it at least warrants, in my eyes, to reopen the investigation. For
Well,
just,
and for me, the funny thing about the interview with Detective Gummer, and
mhm,
that's who it
that's
was,
who it was. Yes.
because here in Colorado, and this is why I had no problem posting that, because in Colorado the law is only one person needs to be privy to the side of the conversation to report it. The
Hmm.
other party does not have to know. And so I know that, and what I did was legal, absolutely legal
It
in
was.
Colorado law. But I did that, and the reason why I did that was because when I interviewed Dr. Kelly, I did not record that, but I had someone with me. So I do have someone as a backup of that conversation that took
Okay.
place. And so, but I didn't want to have to face that again. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to record this conversation because, I'm not going to lie. If somebody's going to say something and I don't like what they like, I didn't agree with Dr. Kelly's stance. He's
Hmm.
like, well, from what I've read and I'm reading these reports, they're really shoddy. They're not very good, and this is not how they should have been done. But from what I'm reading, I believe that David did it, and I state that as plain as day.
Yep.
But he also said that, because I asked him, I said, well, if I can present you evidence that he didn't, would you be willing to look at that? And then would you change your mind? He said, absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, then we all know the fiasco that took place with the unmentionables on that. But I'm not going to twist something to fit an agenda. I'm going to say what somebody has to say. But because of that, I said with Gummer, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and record this. But here's the thing. Again, here's where the psychology background for me pays off, because right away, the first thing out of his mouth is, well, I know that you have a medical ground in that you have a lot of the grooming, the
Hmm.
building up your ego.
Yep.
It's the schmoozing.
Yeah. It is
And right
so.
away,
It's so obvious.
my red flags are just flying, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I know what's coming now, and I don't get schmoozed, so and I'm like, whatever, you can say all you want to do, but I'm gonna still ask you the question. And no matter how many times I tried to get him, it was just like, no, no, no. And then finally at the end, it's like he's just like, well, no, we're just not gonna reopen it. And I said,
That's what it came. Yeah. That's
regardless of whether we give you proof, doesn't matter, we're not gonna open it.
Yeah, they think they did a bang up job from what he says, and I just
Mm-hmm.
cannot believe that with the evidence that you gave them, To me, that's so. I just can't get my. That's so major.
And it isn't, and it wasn't just them. I sent it to the Dakota County Sheriff's Office. I sent it to the city council. I sent it to the governor. I sent it to the mayor. I sent it to everybody I could think of. And I'm like, here's the evidence. Here's what proves this man was murdered. You've got to look at this and get this case reopened, you know, but nobody responded.
That is so, and let's
It's
this case set aside. If you were to bring evidence like what you showed with the skull to most murder investigations, this would be major, correct? This would
yes.
this would be something that they would really look into. I mean, as like I want really people, anyone that's watching this, to really look at the videos that Catherine has, where she shows the photos and she enhances them and stuff, and you can clearly see a pattern where it looks like a ratchet. I know I have ratchets, and when I saw the pattern on your photos, it's so clear when you point it out.
Yeah.
And I
Once
find
you see it, you can't unsee
you can't unsee it. And another thing that I found disturbing is to do whoever did this, if it's ever proven, it's really disturbing that they would do this to this family in the way that they did. I mean, with the young daughter and stuff like that. I find it very. You're dealing with evil people, the way I
Yes.
see it. How who? Let's just play along here for a second. Who do you think died first? How do you think this happened? Do you think this was? Do you think this all of these murders happened at the same time, or was this something that was dragged out and maybe they were torturing David emotionally, trying to do whatever they had in their mind, or was this something that was a spur of the moment and they just killed all three at once? What do you think?
No, I believe that they were killed at different times, but within relatively close time frame, like maybe a day at the most apart. if
Okay.
that. But definitely not at the same time.
Do you think they were killed there?
Um, Kamel probably because of her blood.
Okay.
It is there, and it's pretty much everywhere, as well as on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Ronnie and David, no. With the amount of damage that was done to David, absolutely not. And you see the white dog hairs on his clothes. And Paleo was mostly brown. Yes, he had a white underbelly, but his fur is kind of longer, and these are short white hairs.
They're
that are
short.
all over his, yeah. So there's got to be another animal involved.
And there is
You know?
somebody in his circle of supposed
Yes,
friends
that
that
has
a white dog
white dog with short hair.
with short hair, and they
Um,
never looked at that. I
yeah.
find that fascinating.
Exactly. And
Now
then
go ahead.
and
Yes.
Also, to go along with that is the weight. David's weight. If you remember reading his journal, he was really excited when he got himself down to 168. Right?
Yes,
He
very.
was working out hard and he was training, and he lost all that weight, got down
Yep.
to 168. Yet his weight at the autopsy, I believe. If you don't mind, let me look
No,
this up.
by all means. I mean, even if there was a way you can bring up photos of the skull, I don't know if you can do that on here. I've never actually asked anyone. I first time doing this, as I stated at the beginning.
Right now, are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? I'm pulling up my files.
No, I just see you.
Just see me. Okay. Let me.
If we can't do it, that's cool. I mean, if we can't do it, then we'll figure it out at another time.
Yeah. First of all, though, I want to point out something that's extremely important. Oops, that's. I'm looking up the case. The phone. I don't know why I'm looking at the phone records. I'm trying to find his autopsy report because I want to read it word for word.
Okay,
Um.
that's amazing.
We have Rania. We have Mel, and now where is David's?
And I just want to let the people listening know that if you saw the amount of notes that Catherine has on this case, the amount of research, it's amazing. She's got binders full that I've seen.
I do. They're everywhere.
It's incredible.
Let me see. External. Because they do state what his body weight was. Let me see if I can find that really fast.
Yep, not a problem. Take your time. This is probably actually a big deal, so that's why I'm very curious.
It really, really is, because this stood out to me. I'm like, wait a second here. I should have been ready for this. I'm sorry.
That's okay, not a problem. I wasn't even really ready I was ready, but just I didn't have the knowledge to get going like I wanted to. But we made it. We're here.
Okay,
We're
so
doing amazing.
okay,
We're
so
doing amazing.
as long as everybody else is okay with that.
I am
Um,
too. I'm great with it.
that's his toxicology reports, the identification.
Nothing in his toxicology. Sober.
No, his toxicology was clean. He
No.
absolutely was clean. And that's another thing where, oh, here we go. I found it.
Okay,
Uh, but
perfect.
but now that I know where it is, but yes, his toxicology clearly states that spleen volatile screen was done, ethanol 0.109, but as you know, his body decomposes, it turns into alcohol. So
Yes.
he had no alcohol in the system with decompositional peaks present. So that means they're picking it up from the decomp. Liver drug screen, immunoassay negative, no basic or neutral drugs present on chromatography. And they specifically were looking for things like the pot and the mushrooms.
I was just
and
gonna say
everything.
that. I was gonna
It
say,
was clear.
didn't they find a big mountain of like a grinder full of pot on the like? Okay, so he's got no THC in his system.
Correct.
What
He was
about
clean.
his wife? Clean.
She was clean. The only thing in her system was aspirin, a compound found in aspirin, or
Okay.
something similar to ibuprofen, and that was it.
Wow.
Okay, and now for David. Now, mind you, remember, let's go back to he was so proud. He got down to
Yes.
168.
Yes.
Super excited.
He was.
Now, the external examination of the body. Now, with the body, the head is going to weigh roughly about 8 pounds, right?
Okay.
So you figure so you got to take off a little bit of weight. The body is that of a well-developed, 70 inches long, 128-pound male.
Oh my God. Where did all
He
the
went 40 pounds. He's missing 40 pounds.
Okay, and the
So roughly
dog
32.
right.
Let's do 32, including we'll give him because most of his head was missing. So 32 pounds are gone. So that tells me he was kept away from food for an extended period of time before he was killed.
Wow.
So that's why I think, in my mind, the only thing that makes sense, and I'm not saying this is 100% correct, but for me, right now, with what I'm reading and what I'm finding, the only thing that made sense is that he was held somewhere and was not allowed to eat, and he lost weight fast.
And what this also led into what I was going to ask you. If he was led away and held somewhere, wasn't there damage? One of his hands was mummified, and another,
His
how I'm not sure. I think that's how you worded it. But there was damage to both hands, like he was bound, or some
um,
type of damage.
his right hand is missing. Remember, so we
Right,
don't know.
correct. Sorry.
His left hand is mummified, and so are his feet, but so were little Ranya's. Now, when I asked Dr. Kelly about that, now I did research, and they say that mummification, depending on the condition, it can happen faster in the hands and feet because there's less fat to
Okay.
keep that from happening. And when I talked to Dr. Kelly about that, he did say it wouldn't surprise him to see mummification in the hands and feet in this situation. So whether or not he was bound, I don't know, because I don't know if they did any kind of test. Did they swab his wrist? Did they look for like tape, or did they? I have no idea.
I'm willing to bet by the rate of by the looks of the investigation, they didn't. Just
Correct.
because why would they? Now,
Right.
with the missing hands of everybody in the family, how did they explain that away? Is that they're blaming everything on the dog?
Yes, Paleo ate David's right hand, both of Kamel's hands, both of David and Kamel's faces, and only Ranya's right arm, and then fractured her third rib.
The whole time while he had dog food in an easy bag that was on the floor.
Yeah, this is an amazing dog. This dog is just beyond crazy. Has such good self-control. He will pick the hardest parts of the human body to consume, ignore his food, and then move them all over the room, and then cover up Kamel's head with a blanket, and then turn her over. I mean, it's ludicrous.
It's ludicrous. It really is. And how did they? From what I saw in the autopsy report, that his young daughter had a broken rib. Did they ever explain that away?
They never explained it, no. And it was up underneath her arm, with the arm. And now, mind you, this arm is missing.
Missing.
From the
Yes.
socket.
Yes.
So it was torn out of the socket, and which is an extremely difficult thing to do.
I was going to ask you that.
Their tendons and ligaments are strong. Oh my
Yes.
goodness, they're super strong.
I was going to ask you that if that's a hard thing to pull. Like
Very.
it wouldn't happen from a gunshot wound. Is what
No.
or falling on the ground from the gunshot, falling down or anything. It wouldn't happen. So this was
No.
somebody that yanked.
Yeah.
You would
And
think.
she has a good portion of skin missing from her right pec area.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks to me like, and then there has to be a good amount of pressure because her little ribs are a little bit softer and pliable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So to fracture that, now it wasn't a full complete break, it was fractured. But to fracture that, there's got to be quite amount of force put on that area underneath the rib. So you're like, okay, what the dog couldn't do that. I'm sorry, the dog's, you know, a dog wouldn't be able to. Oh, I'm sorry, I get so flustered.
I get used to you and your videos getting frustrated because it's maddening.
It is.
I
It
don't
really
and
is.
I don't know why they didn't test all of this stuff and just to even rule it out, just so they could say, because they could say to people like us, well, we did all the testing and you may think what you want, but this is the testing. You can't argue with the testing. But they didn't do any of that. And the thing that we did miss over was, what about this bullet that they found in the ceiling? This is the bullet that they finally said. At first, they didn't find any bullet that was in David that killed David. And then, what, a month later, it shows up mysteriously. They all missed it. It was in the roof.
Chris Klein called them and told them that they missed the bullet hole in the ceiling.
So all the investigators, the cleanup crew, they
The
missed
family,
the family.
other friends that were in there.
And it just...
And that's why it's so crazy. And when you look at the reports, how they write it, they said that it was brought to their attention
Mm-hmm.
that there was a bullet hole in the ceiling. And then when they get there, their exact words are, there is an obvious defect in the ceiling as they open the door. So
Okay.
if this obvious defect is there, February 17th, it would have been obvious to the 30 people walking through that house the whole 4 weeks prior to that.
Wow.
But yet it was never found.
And they did eventually find the bullet in the attic, if I'm correct. And of course, when they must have tested the bullet and they found David's DNA all over this bullet, right? Like they have proof now that this went through him. I'm assuming that this is a case closed. They found the bullet covered in his DNA. He shot himself with this bullet, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, no. When they tested it for blood and it came up negative for blood, and so then they took it to the lab and they swabbed it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they sent that swab, and the only thing they could find from the swab was DNA. Now they did not determine where that DNA came from, but it was not blood, it was not brain tissue, it was not hair. It was not skin. It was none of that. They could see nothing. When you look at the fragments from Kamel that were located,
Yes.
and you can clearly see,
You can see it.
know how sad of an event that was.
Yes.
You look at this smushed fragment that was found in the attic,
Yep.
and not only is it devoid of anything that represents that it went through any kind of a body,
Mm-hmm.
but it has no blood.
And that's
It's
very
just-
that's highly unlikely, right? If a bullet goes through your head, there's no way there's not going to be something on it if
Correct.
it goes through your
Yes,
head.
because especially with hollow points, they expand and
Mhm.
mushroom on impact.
Right.
And the head is pretty hard, so the minute it goes through there, it's going to start to mushroom. And as it's tumbling, it's going to be closing up and gathering materials into it before it exits.
Right.
So yes, it will have stuff within those mushroom sections, and there was nothing in that fragment. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is David's, and remember, he's like this. The left side of his face is now facing the window. Now I'm going by their scenario, and I'm
Yes.
letting them know how their narrative isn't working here.
Mm-hmm.
So his exit wound is on the left side, which is facing the window.
Right.
But the bullet in the ceiling is this way.
Okay.
So we have something going this way, but this trajectory is this way.
That doesn't.
And they never explain that.
And
Am
isn't it that he is, and plus where the gun was, it was his wrong hand, correct?
It was on the left side of his body.
Body, he's right-handed, so
Yes.
that this is
And
manic.
see, and this is the thing. And when I read the reports, and this is what I tried to explain to people. Now, when I first started to do my EMT courses, I had fantastic instructors, and they were paramedics, had been for a long time, and they drilled into our heads. Your right is the patient's left. Your right is the patient's left. Because
Yep.
when you look at these reports, even the police officers get it wrong. Found on David's right side.
It's not.
because it's their right side. So they're assuming but see, criminals and most people who are doing these acts do the same thing. It's on their right side. So as they're putting something down, it's just how the brain works.
Right.
So you have to train yourself to think the opposite.
Okay.
And to me, as soon as I'm reading these reports, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. I'm like, hello, that was placed there. The person who put this down put the gun down with their right hand on his side, thinking they were placing it on David's right side. Because let's face it, even for someone who did that, this had to have been traumatic, even for them, to do this.
I would hope. I hope it was.
Okay, yeah. Let's say that we hope it was.
I hope it was
So
because
they probably were not thinking very clearly when they placed all this. When they were staging things, they didn't
Right.
think it through. Like the bloody footprints. It's only the right foot, and it's at the side of the island where the laptop's not even at. Because they're trying to say he went to walk to the laptop and type
Yes.
it in. It's on this side, but the laptop is over here, where there's no footprints.
that's the first thing I
Again,
thought of.
yeah. Again, nothing matches up with
Okay, and
any-
then, and what is your thoughts on this? The Allah Akbar that was written on the
Allahu Akbar?
yes, and that was written on the wall, correct?
Yes.
In supposedly Camilla's blood. Is it what
Yeah,
they?
it was Mel's book.
It was Camilla's blood, but it wasn't Dave. It does. I've looked at the handwriting samples that you've shown, and it does not match. I mean, I'm not a writing expert, but you can tell it's not David's writing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you were saying that there was writing on a notepad and some other things. Was any of this ever tested? Did they test his handwriting and test the writing on the wall to make sure it matched David's? Anything like that?
I did see recently in documents that Greg got in a longer, the 485 or 488 pages.
Right. Yeah, he does amazing work too.
Yeah, it does show where they were doing some handwriting comparisons, and when you look at their notes, they have little notations, but that was never in any of the final reports. But there was never really in a conclusion drawn. Right? There's nothing in there that states we concluded that this is David's handwriting. They just are like, well.
And do you think it's his handwriting on the wall?
No. And because when you look at how the prints are made, you see fingers at first start to come
Yes.
down before the thumb gets there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody's going to be doing it with all their hand, they're just going to go, whoosh, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to go like this, oh, wait, now let me add my thumb. And so it seemed like it was an afterthought. Okay, let me put this up here and hold the hand down. Who knows? But David has a very distinct way of writing certain letters. And I don't care how big you're writing, you're going to keep to your style.
Exactly.
Pretty closely.
Pretty close. Yeah.
And it's not, of course, it's not going to be exact, but none of those letters match his writing at all.
No, and what I just find it. I don't know if I hope the people that did this don't think they did a great job at staging this, because to me it's awful what they've done, and that's what really amazes me, that the police are so confident on this verdict that he did a murder suicide, which nothing leads to that, from what I can tell. And with the mystery dog, like apparently this dog did everything, and I've always found that funny. What did you think of the movie on Netflix, The Gray State? Did you see it?
It was a joke. It was scripted. It had a narrative, and something that they wanted something stated in the way they wanted it stated.
Mm-hmm.
And they put it together to put that information out.
To put, like I said earlier, to point us in that direction.
Yeah, but yet nothing that they put in there correlates with the actual evidence.
Right,
They
right.
take stuff out of context. They twist things. They get these guys to say how they were such great friends and how they're talking about how they knew David. And when you get in there, and like you said, when you read his journal, you found out that David had pretty much cut all of them out of his life.
Yes.
Months and months way in advance, even before summer.
Right.
And
then Camilla was also, they were both pulling away from their family, correct?
Yes, and how they were trying to make, I can't remember if it was in the Netflix documentary Heidi Lish or if it was someone else, Camel's friends, right, that they
Mhm.
were interviewing, And they were like, yeah, and they were leading you to believe that David forced her to quit her job.
Yep.
But when you read his diary, he's like, I can't believe Camille just did this. She up and quit. And I'm going to support her, but man, am I surprised.
Right. Right.
So it wasn't him, it was her. And she did it because she was tired of how they were treating not only her, but her colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, enough is enough. And that's why you would think her friend would say, what, you don't think I can come up with this on my own? This is what Camille's saying. Don't you think I can think of this stuff on my own?
Mm-hmm.
Camille was insulted.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so,
I agree.
yeah.
And then what did you see The Rise when they put that out on Netflix?
I saw that recently. I didn't see it at first, but I did see it recently. And isn't that the one where they're doing all of the interviews? Right?
Yes.
They're having all
Yes.
the guys talking. Yeah.
What do you think of that one?
Um,
If you remember it, I mean, I've watched it a few times because you do miss a lot the first time you watch it, and I just think it's more of the same with.
well, I was gonna say it doesn't appear to me as something that David put together.
But he
It looks
was
like
working on something called The Rise, correct?
yes, he was, but he was gonna turn that over to the guys.
Okay.
And he's like, hey, you know what, you guys, and because a lot of you did a lot of work on it, I will hand this to you. Take it. This will be your baby.
Okay.
And it's pretty much how it looks because it doesn't look like David's work at all.
Right.
Yes, he's being interviewed and you see him talking into a lot of it, but it just seems, like you said, pieced together to form a certain agenda,
Right.
a certain narrative.
That's
And
what.
my air conditioner is going to go on. It's going to be really loud. Let me go turn it down.
Okay,
because
not a
it's
problem.
super loud.
Okay.
I didn't think it was that hot in here.
She's back.
Oh,
Oh,
it sounds like a freaking jet engine.
that's what I was wondering. I was like, wow, that's loud. It's a tank or something going through her house. Oh my god. But that's good now. I can hear you now. Perfect. So no, back to what we were saying. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. I had so many questions. So hopefully if I missed anything we can do a second interview down the road because I know I'm gonna as soon as I've done this interview I'm gonna be like, I forgot to ask her this, I forgot to ask her that. So I'm hoping you'll agree.
Anytime.
That would be
Yeah.
amazing because I know that you're keeping up on this. What
Well, I will
my
say that
go ahead.
just so you and your listeners know, Sophie and I are working on something that has come to our attention recently, but then also something that we've known all along, and it has to deal with the blood.
Mhm.
Um, so we're working. It's going to take us a while. This isn't something that's going to be out in a couple of weeks,
Okay.
but we have something pretty big coming down the pipe. So
That's very exciting. Now, let's play devil's advocate for a minute, and we believe everything that we've been told about this case. Because I do remember from what I saw in the documentary, and actually from some of the. She was having, I don't want to use the word paranormal experiences going on, but you can clearly see where she herself talks about it in the movie and in other videos. What do you think? That's the one thing that is really bothering me. What do you think was going on with her? Like I know that they were always struggling with the religion. They were kind of exploring different spiritualities, which I think is totally normal. As you get older,
right.
you experience new things. I'm not saying that they tried to stage it.
They were
They're-
searching.
They were searchers, yes, same as me. And so, what do you make of her having these like paranormal visions and voices? Do you think that maybe that could have there been something going on where they were losing grip a little bit?
In my take on no, were they losing the grip? No, not at all. But my take on this whole situation is a little bit different from what a lot of people. Mainly because I guess because I see things when you experience life in a different way, you see things in a different
Mhm.
way. And so how I experience life in situations like this, like growing up, my mother used to think it was really funny to invoke spirits, right? You know,
Okay.
having them come in and turning off your lights and all this other stuff. So
Mhm.
I've seen entities, so I know how real they can be. But when I found out, and the thing with Kamel is, I believe she really saw something. But David, he didn't understand it. And
Right.
so but at the same time, he was trying to support her and document it. But then there's that other side of him going, well, come on, let's kind of figure out what this is. And but when I found out that Danny August Mason and that actually a lot of those GS guys were really into the quote unquote paranormal, um, to me, was it a true entity? Because maybe they did something that they shouldn't have done. Some people say that they see things when they play with the Ouija board. Now that's not what they did, but you know what I mean. When you
Yes.
start invoking spirits, things
Yes.
can happen. Or was were these things that were occurring in their home due to things being planted and carried out by the people who could be involved? To me, it's either way. Either one right now is a plausible explanation. But do I see them as losing a grip? No.
So you don't
And
think
I
there's any in your from the research you've done, you don't think there's any way, because we know that David was a war veteran, that he
Mhm.
did a couple tours of duty. I know that in his last tour of duty, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was very wasn't happy about how it went, how he got deployed again, and how he was,
Right.
and stuff like that. You don't think, because we know that soldiers see a lot of awful things.
Hmm.
You don't
And
think
he
that,
did.
and he did. He said that, and we saw also him speak in the. I'm trying to peel the good parts out of the
Hmm.
documentary, that where he's the one talking, so it can't be taken out of context. And he's clearly states himself and his friends say that sometimes David would go into a dark place, and that if he ever went to that dark place again, that they were to call him out on it and intervene, because they would lose contact with him for a few days at a time. Do you
And
think it's possible that he went into a dark place and this happened?
no, no. And let me tell you why. Because when he was referring to a dark place, that's when he was isolating himself in writing. He had delved so deep into his writing,
Mm-hmm.
everything else just suffered and nothing else was of importance.
Okay.
That is a dark place. As a writer, and this is what I try to explain to people, because when I actually, in my second book that I wrote, it's not published, but I did finish it. Now, when I finished that book, I actually moved to a different state
Okay.
and I locked myself down for weeks at a time. I took no phone calls, I didn't look at the internet, I didn't answer emails because I had to focus to get this finished. So unless you write, you don't understand what he's saying by a dark place. He didn't snap. He never lost his temper. Um, but at these times, is if when you're reading his journal, I think this is at the same time when he was experimenting. I think with the mushrooms and stuff like
Yes.
that in
Yes.
Madison. And
Yes.
then he says, "That was bad. I don't ever want to do that again."
I was just gonna say that he did not enjoy it. Like
No,
from what
not at
his,
all.
not at all.
So that's not somebody who's going to snap. And with my time spent at a lot of military hospitals, and then being neighbors to a gentleman who actually was a Vietnam War vet,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen these people who snap and just they're off in these, they're back where they were, and it's not pretty. There's no mistaking it. I mean,
Wow.
it's when somebody says they have PTSD and you see that, you know it's PTSD.
Okay.
David never showed any signs of that at all. He wasn't happy, which is why he finally told the military, "I'm not going to go do this anymore." He took a stand, and for him, I think that was his saving grace.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where he kind of saved himself. He said, "No, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't care what you do to me, but I'm not going to go carry that gun anymore."
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't.
And he didn't. That's
So,
true.
and then he was working out those experiences in his writing and in his trailer. So it was cathartic for him. It wasn't sending him to a dark place where he was going to spin out of control. Again, it sends you to a dark place because you're so engrossed in what you're doing.
Right.
He said he even was ignoring his own daughter, and he's like,
Yes.
"Wait, what am I doing?" And then when he realized that he was treating his daughter the way he felt his father treated him, it was a huge wake up call. He's like, "I can never do that." I don't want to be that kind of dad.
Right.
And then he set on a purposeful track to get to know his daughter and then to make a better life for his whole family, take care of his wife and his child. And at the end, when we're reading his journal and then you see at the end where he was finally excited, he's like, I know, I finally connected with her.
Mm-hmm.
That's not somebody who snapped.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I just wanted to put that out there because I know people are going to say it's possible he snapped. In fact, my own wife says that it's possible. And what I find kind of weird is, say that the people that we think committed this murder, has anybody tried to, that you know of, you may not even know this, but is anybody trying to make this movie? Has anybody picked up where David left off or tried to make this movie or continue his work? Because to me, why would they murder him? This is another thing that I kind of always am troubled with. Why would they do this murder so brutal? But they're not gaining anything from it. They're not gaining.
They've tried. And yes, they have tried, and they're still trying. In fact, if you look up the copyrights now,
Mhm.
there's both Danny August Mason and Dan Sr.
Yes,
have filed for
copyrights.
of the Gray State,
Right.
which pisses me off to no end because as a writer, I had my first book stolen from me. It has my name on it, and it was sold for almost 20 years on Amazon.
Right.
But I made this much money, so I'm
Wow.
pissed. So
Okay.
when I see that kind of stuff, when I see people stealing other people's work, and when the copyright law states, unless someone specifically leaves a will that says, I leave this to you upon my death, any written material belongs to the writer and the artist and the creator for 70 years after the date of their death.
Okay.
And as far as I know, there was no will.
Okay.
And so nobody has claim to the Gray State, but yet they're all clamoring to get it, and the Gray State guys still keep saying, we're going to finish it. We're going to see this through. We're going to, bring David's dream to life. His dream wasn't for you to steal his work and take his money. His dream was
Exactly.
to leave your ass because you weren't doing anything. Sorry.
That's okay. You're allowed to swear.
I'm sorry.
You are no. Don't not apologize, Catherine. I'm surprised I'm not swearing more because I get upset like you do when I talk about this. So to kind of bring this, let me just bring this into a closure thing. I want you to tell me. Let's tell me the 6 things that make you believe this was a murder suicide. The 6 things that bother you the most in this case, or you can tell me more. I just want off the top of your head, what is it that does not add up with you, and you think that this is a murder for sure?
Oh, okay. So it's a triple homicide and not a murder suicide.
So yes, sorry.
Okay.
I stand
Okay.
corrected.
It is the damage to the skull, number one. It is the lack of blood at the crime scene. It is the lack of lividity in all 3 of their bodies. It is the body placement. It is the lack of DNA. The fact that they don't have the bullet that killed David. The fact that Sean is talking about, hey, you're going to send me to prison. There are other people, and Danny August Mason, who wouldn't sign and is still trying to fight to get rights to something that wasn't his. The fact that there's only white dog hair on his clothes when his dog was mostly brown. The fact that the door is ajar, the window is unlocked. Not enough dog. I mean, I could go.
I knew you were gonna. I knew you were gonna do that. I was like, she's gonna go on a roll, and it's gonna be one after the other. And I that's amazing, and that's what I'm telling you, people. You have to look at this case, and you have to look at Catherine's work. It's not as cut and dry as the police wanted to make, and even like I've heard you say, this evidence should have been looked at and processed, if anything, to prove people wrong and to eliminate people. Mm-hmm. And to me, I find it just, after all these years, I found it hard to believe that they came up with this after 2 hours. And then after you did more research and you got that skull fragment where you see the ratchet marks and the tool marks that he was struck with, and they didn't reopen it, I don't understand. Why do you think they're not? Why wouldn't the police want this reopened? What do you think?
My best guess is they probably know who did it, but they can't prove it.
Okay.
So it's easier to have a closed case than to leave something open forever on their books. that's my best guess is that. And
They
I
don't
think
want to be proven
they're
wrong.
digging their heels. I'm sorry,
They
what?
don't want to be proven wrong, kind of.
Well,
That
they're digging their heels in now because far too many people see that it was a rush to judgment on their part, and that they have absolutely zero evidence to back up their stance. And instead of saying, okay, yeah, we rushed to judgment, it's their ego won't allow them to be wrong. So I
exactly.
see a lot of ego at play here, and that's sad because they've labeled this man who was 168 pounds at his lowest, which he was super happy, who is now 128 pounds upon his death. Hello, ding ding ding.
Yeah,
And and then the brutal beating he took, the horrible things that was done to his wife as well as his daughter, and they're content to allow him to carry that
title.
tag with him because he's not alive to defend himself. And to me, I see that as a very cowardly thing to do. To me, that I would be more impressed if someone were to step up and say, okay, everybody's pointed stuff out, and they weren't prepared. I don't care what they say. This was their first murders in over 6 or 7 years, and
Oh,
before
wow.
that they had one. With it 3 years before that, so within 10 years they'd only had one besides this. They had no idea what they were doing. They were clueless. And instead of saying we made a mistake, at the time we did the best we could, and we right now we don't have enough evidence. The scene is now gone. This will forever be an unsolved case. I could respect that,
Hmm.
right?
Me
And I
too.
think most people would. Most people would say, "Thank you." But the fact that they're digging in their heels and saying, we're right. We don't care how much evidence. We don't care if you show us solid proof he's innocent. He's guilty.
And
Well, there you go. It's ego.
and he's carrying that label as a man that killed his
Domestic
fam
violence. Yeah.
to the highest degree. Now, if you don't want to answer this, this is perfectly fine. But from what I can tell, have you, because of all this research and the people you've named, have you actually been threatened at any point by people telling you to
Oh, yeah.
stop
Yeah.
research?
Oh, yes.
Really?
And in fact, I did move recently because someone decided to drive by my house where I lived at before
Hmm.
and shot a pellet gun into my window. Thank God I had a double pane storm window in my front. It was a big, huge window. And I heard something. I had just walked out of my living room into my kitchen, and I heard something hit, and my dog's kind of alerted.
Hmm.
And at first I'm like going, well, that was really weird. Maybe I should just go check and see what it was. Because they're like staring at the front window. I'm like, oh, come on, you guys. And as I walk around the corner, I see this big old hole in one of the panes of glass in my front window. And I go out, and all I see is a black truck and an arm, an orange sleeve. But as you know, your mind can remember different colors. So it might
Exactly.
not have been orange. But
Right.
I remember seeing orange. Arm with a hand like this coming in, and then go back in the truck, and the truck took off.
That's
So,
I
and
never
then,
knew that. I've never seen you do a video about that.
well, yeah, because I don't want to give these guys, they do stuff like this to a lot of us that, we're either followed or people come into your house. Like I would find, um, in the house that I had before, again, my same house, which I finally said, you know what, I'm just done. I'm going to move to a gated community, which is where I'm at now. So I would leaves like say a bottle. 'Cause I used to drink soda back then. I don't. I drink water now. But say I had a can of soda on the table, just
Hmm.
as an example, and I would leave it there. I'd get up, put everything, and then I would go somewhere, be gone for a few hours. I come back home, and now this can of soda is in my kitchen sink. So stupid things like this would
Wow.
happen all the time. Different things within my house would be moved, and I'm like, all right, whatever. And to me, it's very childish, and it's really it didn't scare me. It made me angry. I had a roommate at the time, and she got scared. And I just told her, I said, look, knock it off. 'Cause, I mean, she really freaked out. I'm like, you got to quit this crap.
Hmm.
Just stop.
Hmm.
Because it's just meant to harass. Because if they were really going to do something, they would have done it. You know what I mean? They
Right.
could have come in and done something, but they didn't. And
And they wouldn't tell you about it ahead of time
exactly.
or give them. But have you actually received emails from any of these people that we've
Yes,
mentioned, and they're telling
I
you to back off?
yes, Sean Wright, actually.
Not
He
Sean
was
Wright, Sean motherfucking Wright.
Oh yes, as he calls himself, I'm Sean motherfucking Wright. And I'm like, whatever, dude. Okay. Ooh, I'm scared.
I had to add that in, folks, because I just find that funny. But
Well, yeah,
so,
because that's how he writes things. And yeah, he's very rude and very condescending and very, you guys need to drop this, and I'm like, who do you, and I would tell him, who do you think you're talking to?
mhm,
I'm not sure who you think you're talking to, but you don't talk to me like that. I will talk to you if you're decent.
mhm,
And I'm not saying we have to agree, but don't come at me calling me an MF-er. Sorry, I don't play that game.
right.
With anybody, it's just rude,
It's
and,
rude. It
and
is.
uncalled for.
And I find that that's very telling that they would like obviously they don't there's somebody that doesn't want you doing this research. I truly, and same with uh then his name is slipping,
Greg?
Junior. Yes,
Oh,
Greg.
oh, okay.
uh the people that you actually done videos with and that Greg Fernandez Jr. Am I
Yes,
butchering that?
Fernandez Jr.
All right, thank you, Greg. I got it right. So yeah, like the research you guys are doing is incredible. I truly find it fascinating, and that you guys have kept with it for so many years. This wasn't like something you did for a couple weeks and then you're like, oh no, you've been on this for years. That's what I'm trying to let people know in this, is that this is something that you haven't just looked at for a couple weeks or even a month or 6 months. This is years and years in the making,
And we take no money for this, and that was one of the things that was for me, my personal
mhm,
criteria. Is the reason why I really stuck with the group was because Dan and Greg feel the same way I did. Not one of them ever monetized their videos, and I'm like, I will never do that.
mhm.
I should never be about us trying to make money. We're trying to get some justice for this family.
I agree. I agree, and it's very. I'm trying to think. It's a, I don't even have words anymore. I really don't. I'm so frustrated. I can't even imagine with the. I've done a lot of research, but nowhere near yours. You've done way more. And the amount, it really struck me when you said that you used to lose sleep over this. As you went through more files, you would be pacing the floors. Like you really took this on as a. You want David's name cleared.
Yeah,
I
I
can
mean,
tell. I can tell.
if like I if when I was reading this stuff, and if what it showed me was that he really did do this, I would have had no qualms to say, okay, you guys, you're just misunderstanding. He did this, and here's why.
Hmm.
But everything is making this man guilty when he's a victim. And to cause a victim to be a perpetrator is never okay, especially with a vet. I spent all of my time working with most of my EMT work was done on post,
Hmm.
and different posts, in the United
Hmm.
States. And at the time, I was married to a guy who was in the military. I'm, I defend our military,
Hmm.
and so for them to do this, I take it as an affront, a personal affront.
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, no, it's never okay. Again, if he was guilty, I would be the first one to say, sorry, but he did it.
I truly believe that. That's another thing why I loved your research. I honestly do believe, Catherine, that if you came across right now a piece of evidence that was cut and dry, and you looked at it and said, he did it, you would admit it. You would do a video. I know you would, and you would be like, okay, we were wrong. Here's
Yep.
the evidence. He did it, but it's not there. At least not that
Yeah.
I've seen.
And that's what I tell people. It's like, at this point, even if they showed me a video of him supposedly doing this,
Hmm.
I wouldn't believe it because of the skull piece on the floor, that the ME fit to his body. And that skull piece tells me he was murdered, and it was cut off his head.
Which
So he could not have done this.
exactly. And do you think there's any ritual, some type of ritual that they were trying? I don't understand. I don't. If you want to kill the family because you're mad, I get it. You want to frame David and say he did it, I get it. But why? What do you think? Why the brutalizing? That's the part that are we just dealing with evil people that want to make a point and hurt a family and kill a family and make them suffer? Or do you think there's like a ritual or a message here?
I think it's kind of both. What I see initially is just rage, anger, pure rage.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, after they realize what they did, it's like, oh no, now we have to CYA. And from the CYA is where I see a lot of Freemasonry stuff, occult stuff, all being thrown into the mix. And when you start to realize and start to, like the video we just did, Ordo of Chow, it's, you see, and there's more. Somebody had asked me, and I can't remember who it was, and I said, yeah, there's actually, we could do a part 2. There's that much more evidence and stuff that was put together.
Wow.
And when you start to look at it in a whole different way, and again, not saying that's how it went, but it starts to all make sense.
Right, and
But
it's
again,
like they crammed every piece of like Freemasonry. They wanted religion in it. They crammed it all. They were panicking.
honor killing. They
Honor
did it.
killing. They wanted to cover their base. They're like, we're going to throw everything at this, if not to at minimum confuse them,
Yep.
or something. But I just found that they really, really crammed a lot into that crime
And this
scene.
is, yeah, and this is why I see that it was more than just one person because of the different elements. This is different mindsets of somebody, coming in and going, oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, that's a great idea. You do that, and I'm going to go do this. And you see what I'm saying? And it's just like, yeah, to me, it's just, and to actually subdue David in the way that they had to have done to get his family to hurt his family, there had to have been more than just one person. Because
Exactly.
with his training and the way he loved his family, I easily see him sacrificing his life to save them, to get them out. But
I agree.
that didn't happen.
I agree. And now, just to wrap this up, I actually almost forgot, was the last video you did, you showed a lot of, I want people to check your last video out, where I think it's the last one, unless you've done another one, but I don't think so. It's the blood, it shows all the bloody clothes that
Yeah.
David was wearing, and that, from what you can tell in your experience, and I could just tell by when I look at the bloody clothes, you don't think, do you think it doesn't add up, correct, by the blood on the clothes? There seems to be a lot of soaking blood. Like, there's a lot of blood through all those clothes.
Yeah.
It's-
It's soaked through 3 shirts and a pair of sweatpants and onto his underwear. That doesn't come from a single gunshot wound to the head.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, is that
Especially, the pattern that blood makes on his clothes is not indicative of a single gunshot wound to the head.
wow? So that the clothes, that's another almost that coincides with the skull fragment. Is that you got the blunt force trauma, and I remember you saying that the impact was so hard on the skull that it was actually indented on the inside of the, like the damage went all the way through and left an imprint on the underside. Is that correct?
Yes, I did say that because that's what my corner friend was saying, that they suspected due to their experience.
Okay.
Because of the way the impact was on what they saw.
Okay. Wow, and so do you think these blows could have killed, one of these blows is hard enough to kill David?
The impact?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, multiple would have left him, rendered him unconscious and unable to do anything. But yes, there were a couple that could have easily could have killed him. And then there's another skull piece, which I'm going to go and do more research on, but that was also in the pictures that came with that Tony dropped on our page, which shows that when you compare how this one looks compared to the other ones, you see it's mainly all red or brownish colored, which tells me that there was a lot of subdural bleeding going on, that this skull came into contact with a lot of fresh blood.
Wow.
So
he could have been beaten for days, weeks.
I don't know for how long, but we know it was multiple impacts. Yeah, but we know he lost a minimum of 32 pounds.
And that can't happen after death. I don't know anything about a body that passes away. Like, do you lose weight when you die right away, or that's an extreme amount of weight for somebody to lose?
Because Kamel's, her body weight and Rania's were pretty much right on line with what they were before.
Oh,
David's
really?
was not.
Okay, I missed that. So that doesn't make sense then. Like, again, like, none of this adds up. Incredible, Michelle. I don't. Is there any? Okay, to wrap this up, is there anything you want to say? Do you want to promote your channel? Do you have any final thoughts on this case and what want people to look into?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for being willing to jump on board and get out there, because I think the more people that start having channels and covering this, I think the better chance we have. And anything that you need from us or the group, and I know Greg would be willing to help you, Sophia would be willing to help you, Dan when he gets back into the swing of things. You have a whole group of people at the Justice for David Crowley and family page on Facebook, there are so many people, and I have a lot of people contacting me because they're seeing things now. They're picking things up in different photos, and so I'm going back and forth with them, and we're researching what they're finding. There are so many people. It's not just me. It's not just Greg, but a lot of people, and I just can't say thank you enough. But
Oh,
keep it up.
you're
And
very welcome. You inspired me to do this. You really did. I enjoy your videos that much. Do you think that if there's enough people that get behind this and we start doing more videos, that it could be cause a landslide, like a tipping effect for the police, where they would have to open this?
I believe that the more people that cover this, the more attention we will get. And at the very beginning, when the group first started and I first joined the group,
Mm-hmm.
somehow the news station down where I was living found out about it, and they contacted me, and they're like, we'd like to know a story. What's your connection? And at the time, I didn't really have a connection, and I didn't want to tell anybody what my past history. I mean, okay, I was born in Minneapolis.
Okay.
You know, I'm from Minnesota, so that's kind of another connection for me. But at the time, I'm like, well, we're not really growing, and so they kind of dropped it.
Okay.
But I think if they knew now, we went from like a couple thousand to where we're at almost 10,000 now
Mm-hmm.
people in the group, and that now more and more people are starting to do videos. I really think that we'll be able to get the media's attention, at least a local news station somewhere
Okay.
that would cover it.
That would
Which
be
will be
amazing. It would be amazing because I really want to help try to clear this man's name. And as you say, I'm like you. If there's ever evidence that comes along that clearly shows he did it, I would be the first to say he did it. I really would. And I wouldn't want to say, I would hurt me to say that because I don't want to believe he had it in him, and I don't believe he had it in him to do this. And I want to see his name cleared, because that's an awful thing to have stuck to your name, that you somehow snapped one day and murdered your family and yourself. I couldn't imagine, and I can't imagine what both families are even going through now. Like, is anyone trying? Where did the family stand with all of this? Are they all for you and doing videos? Or are they staying silent?
I don't, I have no idea. I know David's family, as far as I know, they've never contacted me. I suspect at one point Sidra contacted me, but under a different name, but I have no proof of that.
Okay.
Because they were pretty much at the very beginning were asking me, where did you get this, and so not to stay away from it, but where are you finding your information, kind
I
of
see.
thing. But as soon as I let them know where I was getting this and how I found it, I never heard from that person again. So that's what made me suspect it was Sidra. But yeah, nobody, the
You-
families have never reached out to me.
Incredible. You think they would want his name cleared? I know if it
I
was
would
my,
think so.
I would
Yeah.
think that if it was my family member, I would be I'd be backing all of you people up, and if anything, to even improve if he did do it. But let's have a fair investigation. I just don't think. I think this was. I really think, like you said, this was rushed from the beginning. They didn't have many murder experience, and I think they went in and just said he did it. Like, and then they just made all the evidence. They tried to fit it all together in 2 hours, incredibly, and that's what they've run with. And they just don't. They've dug their heels in they've put their line in the sand, and I think they just don't want to say we rushed it. I think that's what it is. I don't know if they're don't want to admit that they were wrong, or if they just don't, they just don't, maybe they don't have the funding to reopen it. I don't know.
And that could be it too. I think they know they're wrong, but they're, like you said, and like I stated, they drew their line in the sand, they've dug their heels in, and they're not going to back out. We're going to have to drag them out.
You have to drag them
Well,
out.
that's okay. We'll drag them.
That's
all right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I say. If we got to drag you kicking and screaming, we will. I will.
We will.
And that's amazing, Catherine. I know I'm forgetting stuff, so I definitely want to do another interview down the road with you. Are you game for that? Because
Absolutely.
I know I'm going to think of 100 things when I get off with you. I know it, and I'm sure that happens to you when you do interviews.
Yes.
I'm going to get off and go, I forgot this, and so I definitely want to do a second one with you, and maybe we could even do one with Greg sometime. I'm game for that.
That would be great.
It would be, and I think the more knowledge, the more awareness we put on this, I kind of feel from the research I've been doing, it's kind of fell into the background a bit after it left, because it's not on Netflix anymore. I checked before we did this interview. I wanted to see if it was still on there. So it's going to disappear, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want this man to live with that. It really bothers me. I don't want his name being tarnished like this.
Right.
And So I'm hoping the more that we talk about it and the more videos we do, we can start sparking it up again, like you said, and I'm totally for that. I really want to help. I try to help.
Well, I think you're going to do a lot of help, so keep it up.
Oh, thank you so
Glad
much.
to have you aboard.
Oh, well, thank you. And I can't believe I got to do an interview with you. It's amazing. I've watched so many of your videos, and I was like, someday I'm going to interview this lady because like I said, your research is incredible, and the stuff you've come across, it's really compelling stuff. Anytime I have a friend or a family member that I have a few friends that I've been introducing this case to them, and I send them right to your channel. I'm like, you have to watch all of her stuff in order, and I said you will see what she's pointing out. And when they come back to me, they're like, this is incredible. Like, how did the police come to this? And these are people that don't know anything about investigations.
Yeah,
It's
and I would like to give kind of a shout out. Um, am I considered an armchair detective? Yeah, probably. But I also had jobs where I worked for some attorneys in a previous life, and they taught me how to research. They taught me where to go look for things. And then again, being part of the FBI profiling groups when internet was still young, when you could do things like that. I mean, I've been blessed to be around people who taught me a lot of very invaluable lessons. And that is what I've been able to bring to researching this case. And I try really hard not to base it on opinion, although I do that sometimes, let's face it, we all do.
We're all human.
But I try not to make it about my opinion and about what I see. But if I see something, I have no problem saying, and everything's like, don't ever say absolutes. Well, I'm sorry, his head is absolutely beat in. So for me, there's no question. But I'm also not having to file a legal document, so.
Exactly. Yeah, and so yeah, I definitely. If you maybe like I said, we could do a second interview and get. I'd love to talk to Greg too. I mean, it's another channel I watch. I just got done watching where he's reading the journals passages of David Crowley, and I don't see anything that would lead me to this. I could be missing something, but I just don't see a man that he was too happy where his life was going and excited to get move and get his life going, and he was like, as you said, he was connecting with his daughter. I remember hearing that when he was reading it. He made a lot of progress, and you could see it through the journal entries, and he was growing, and he was finding himself, and he was finding the love for his daughter, because to be honest, he was struggling with being a father.
He was. And when you're in the military, though, you see that a lot. What he went through is not uncommon. And especially for men who are deployed and when they're not there at the very beginning lives of their children, it's really hard for them to come back and to connect. And it's very normal for that man to go, oh, there's a kid here. All I want to do is get to know my wife. That doesn't mean he's a hateful person. He was being honest. He was writing. He never expected anybody to read these thoughts.
Nope.
They were his personal thoughts. But when you watch him progress from going, I don't know what to do with this thing, because he didn't know what it was. Really, it's like, oh my God, I'm dumped into this. What do I do? To wait a second, this is my child, and I remember how I was treated by my dad. I can't do this to her. I have to do better by my child. To at the very end where he's like, I finally have connected with her. That's not going down into a dark hole. That is someone who's going from darkness to light. He found his light. Yeah,
and that's exactly the feelings I felt when I was hearing him read it. I was like, this is not a man going darker. He's coming out of the darkness. So it's very interesting. And is there any more journals, or are they going to be releasing anything else that or you don't know?
Anytime I request stuff, it's always denied. So I have to wait for somebody else. And it's probably because I've not been very nice, and I'll admit it, but it is what it is. But I have specifically requested documents that I was told no, that then were released by Tony onto the page. So there's a lawsuit waiting right there.
Wow.
But I'm putting my ducks in a row, though. I'm not just going to jump into this, because to deny me and then hand it to somebody else, that is illegal. So
that's very strange. Yeah, like I mean, you get the most flack when you're in the right area, the way I look at it. And you're big. I know you've got a lot of flack, and I've heard you say in videos that you've gotten threats before. And I find that, if you weren't scaring people with your research, they wouldn't be doing this. And there's something that they don't want you. I don't think they want you nosing around too much. That's my belief. That they don't want people poking around too much, and so they're going to try to threaten you very cheaply.
And all they have to do is just say, we made a mistake, he was murdered, and it will remain unsolved. And I will walk away. And it's not because they're giving me my way, but it's because they're admitting that the evidence they gave us shows he was murdered. And if they want me to walk, that's all they have to do.
Yeah.
Clear his name. That's all I'm asking.
No, I agree. So, no, that's great. I don't want to, I could keep talking. I'm going to let you go. I've kept you so long here already. I said I didn't want to request an hour, and I don't know how long we've talked, but I've just enjoyed it so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And like I said, anytime we can do this again.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much. And I hope I will send you this so you can post it on your page. You have my full total permission. So as soon as I get it up, you can definitely share it. I can send it to you, whatever you like.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Oh,
sounds good.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Catherine. You have a great evening, and thank you so much for being making this episode very special. My first one.
Thank you. And you did a great job.
Thank you so much. Take care, dear.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Well, there you have it, folks. What an amazing interview. I'm telling you guys, this was an interview that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And what an amazing guest. I want to thank you once again, Catherine. I know I've been thanking you over and over again, but I just want to thank you again. You guys really, really have to go to her page. It's Catherine Michele. And I want you to, if you're interested in seeing the evidence that this lady has accumulated over years and years of research, I'm talking binderfuls of research, and you want to actually see the evidence that she's found to prove that David Crowley did not snap. He wasn't in, as she said, in a dark place, and that this man was framed. And people, it's so clear, guys. If you just watch the videos and watch other videos too. I'm not saying you have to get all your information just from her page. There's a lot of other pages that go over the evidence too. I hope to get those people on as guests as well, because their research is incredible. And I mean, you heard some of the evidence tonight, guys. I mean, what do you want me to say? When you look at the video and it shows the pieces that she's taught, the skull that Catherine's talking about, the skull piece, and she does shows it and then kind of puts the layers on it so you can see the color better and stuff. You can see the ratchet. You can see it's a ratchet. A socket wrench. You see it, and there's multiple on that skull. You can, as soon as you point it out, somebody points it out to you. You can't unsee it, as Catherine said. You just can't unsee it. And the fact that what's always, as I said in the interview, blew my mind is that these police went in there 2 hours after they get this call. They walk in there, and then they walk out 2 hours later with only 3 shell casings, and they have this all wrapped up neatly. David snapped, killed his wife, killed his child, put a bullet in his head, and it was wrapped up that quick. That neat. Just like that. 2 hours. I mean, I've seen people get into a fender bender on the side of the road. I've seen people get into a fender bender on the side of the road, and it take more than 2 hours for the police to go through the evidence, talk to both people that were multiple people that were in the car, write their notes, take pictures, all the insurance stuff. It's taken more than 2 hours. But they want us to believe that the police walk into this scene, and all these medical people, they walk into a scene that's have a dog living there supposedly, who's done tons of damage to the body supposedly, to the house supposedly. It's just frustrating, and that's what I want to leave you guys with. If you guys start going down this rabbit hole and looking into this case, and you go to Catherine Michele's YouTube channel, which I highly recommend you go and subscribe to. As you saw, she's an amazing woman. She's very friendly, if you just talk to her with respect, and she answer, even if you disagree with what you find, if you want to have a discussion with her, she's more than willing to sit down and discuss and toss ideas back and forth. As she said, she's all open for that. You just have to be a little respectful, people. Just, that's all it takes is a little kindness. And she was an amazing guest. I'm so happy that she was the first guest of this podcast. I know, guys, it's a little bit rough of a podcast. I mean, I had to figure a few things out here, and it's kind of crazy. Like, it took me a while to get all of this figured out, but it's only going to get better in the future. I'm definitely going to make sure that everything's up, and it's going to get better as we go down the road. But it's episode 1, man. Episode 1 of Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking. I had to jump in the pond. I jumped in the deep end, and that's the way I wanted to do it, because I wanted to, get my feet wet and have a little fun doing this. So I've been talking long enough, guys. I'm sorry. I really enjoyed that interview. I thank you all for who have stuck through this long interview. I know it's a long one, but it's one worth listening to. As me and Catherine said, David Crowley, at least in my opinion, I'm willing to say I do not believe did this to his family, and I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's just. There's no justice that's been served. And I just want you to think on closing, what if this was one of your family members? That this happened in your family. Actually, let's make it personal, in your family. And that the family and then the memory of your loved one has to live with that hanging over their memory. That's what people are going to think. That they killed themselves, they killed their daughter, his daughter, he killed his wife. And he snapped one day, just out of the blue. He's going, you could see in his journals, you can see them, you read them yourself. The man's life was going uphill. He was embracing being a father. He was embracing being a husband. He was set to move. He wanted to go to Hollywood. He wanted to start, being a movie, started making and creating movies, and multiple projects on the go, and was excited about them. And there's no evidence that they could find in terabytes of information that this man was going down into a dark place and he was losing his grip with reality, and it just made him snap one day. And I know I keep saying that, but my goal is to get involved, and I've been following this case since the day it happened. I was actually following David Crowley's, as I said at the beginning. I was following his videos from, when he was making little clips and putting them up on his Gray State YouTube channel. And I was watching updates of his movie and what he was talking about in interviews and stuff like that to where we are now. And it's my goal, and I hope that someday enough people get behind this, take the time to do the research, watch people's videos that have done the amazing amount of research, and just maybe someday we can get this case reopened, or at least looked at again, and that this man's name can be cleared. And in my opinion, he can rest, his family can rest, his his other family members can rest, that knowing that he didn't do this. And that if it does ever come to that the people that did perpetrate this murder, who did do this to this family, are brought to justice. Because a scary thought is that if he's innocent and somebody did this to David Crowley and his family, these people have not been brought to justice, and they are living, or could be living, in your neighborhood. And that is something that is very scary to think about. That these people are still walking free. And the amount of brutality that, when you look into this case, that these people did to this family, it's scary. And to me, I can only, as I said to Catherine, I can only call it evil. And that's where I want to leave it. I want to see justice for David Crowley. And I'll leave it with this, and I honestly mean this when I say it. If evidence comes forward in the future where it's a cut and dry, indisputable evidence that David did do this to his family and to himself, I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong, and that it was an awful thing that he did, and that even though the evidence showed, we thought that he didn't do it, there is now evidence that he did. I'd be the first to admit that we were wrong and that he did it, and I think Catherine will back me up and say, when I say that she would admit it, she actually did say that during the interview, she has no problem saying that, if there's indisputable evidence that cannot be refuted, that he did it, or that, that he did do it. she would admit she's wrong, and I think everybody researching this case would admit that they were wrong. But as I stand right now, there's just too many red flags all over this investigation, and I've thought that from day one. So that's what I'm going to leave you with, guys. I'm sorry this was, like as I said, a long interview, a long video in general, but you know, to me it was worthwhile, and I want to thank everybody here who checked out this video. Please leave a thumbs up if you liked it. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to build this channel up one person at a time, and I'm in it for the slow, steady haul. And that would be amazing. So if you want to subscribe, that would be great. I'm hoping to have more interviews in the future with Catherine and some other people that are involved in this case. And I got other great interviews coming up with a lot of other different things. Like I said, it's a channel about what I've been thinking. So thank you all for joining. Have a great day, great evening, wherever it is where you may be. And please check out my next video. And I'm going to keep you just guessing what it's going to be. Have a great time, guys. And thank you so much for joining in and being part of my very first episode. It's the first one. So thank you for being here. Take care, guys.